The sun was shining brightly as Marcus stepped out of the bus and onto the busy streets of the city. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the nervous energy bubbling inside him. Today was a big day, perhaps the biggest day of his life so far. At just 19 years old, Marcus had been saving every penny from his part-time job at a local cafe for over a year. His dream? To buy his very first car. It wasn't about luxury or showing off. It was about freedom, independence, and proving to himself that he could achieve something meaningful. With his worn-out backpack slung over one shoulder and an old smartphone clutched tightly in his hand, Marcus walked toward the gleaming glass doors of Prestige Motors, one of the most prestigious car dealerships in town. The building stood tall and imposing, its windows reflecting the sunlight like mirrors. Inside, rows of expensive cars sparkled under bright lights, their polished surfaces almost blinding. Marcus felt a lump form in his throat as he pushed open the heavy door. This place felt worlds away from the small apartment he shared with his mom and little sister. As soon as he entered, Marcus couldn't help but notice how different he looked compared to everyone else around him. Men and women dressed in tailored suits moved gracefully between the cars, chatting confidently with salespeople who wore crisp shirts and shiny name tags. Meanwhile, Marcus stood there in his faded jeans, hoodie, and sneakers, feeling completely out of place. He tried to shake off the discomfort, reminding himself why he was here. "You've earned this," he whispered to himself. "You worked hard for this." His eyes were immediately drawn to a sleek red sports car parked near the entrance. Its curves seemed almost otherworldly, and the price tag displayed on the windshield made his heart skip a beat. $80,000. Marcus chuckled nervously. That number might as well have been written in another language. It was far beyond anything he could afford. Still, he allowed himself a moment to admire it before moving on to more realistic options. It didn't take long for someone to notice him. A tall man with slicked back hair and a perfectly pressed suit approached him with a practiced smile. His name tag read, Greg. "Hey there, can I help you find something?" Greg asked, though his tone suggested he already knew what kind of customer Marcus was, or rather wasn't. Marcus hesitated for a second before replying. Yeah, I'm just looking around. Maybe see if there's something I can afford." He shifted uncomfortably, aware of how young and inexperienced he must have seemed. Greg's smile faltered slightly, but he quickly recovered. "Sure thing," he said, glancing down at Marcus's casual outfit. "These models here are pretty high-end, though. If you're serious about buying, maybe we should start with something practical." The word practical hung in the air like a slap. Marcus felt his cheeks flush with embarrassment. He hadn't even mentioned his budget yet, and already Greg was making assumptions about him. Determined not to let it show, Marcus nodded stiffly. "Okay, yeah, practical sounds good." Greg led him past the flashy sports cars and luxury sedans to a corner of the showroom where older, less impressive vehicles were parked. Even though these cars were clearly cheaper, they still carried hefty price tags that made Marcus's stomach churn. As Greg rattled off details about mileage, engine specs, and financing plans, Marcus struggled to keep up. Every question he asked seemed to irritate Greg further until finally the salesman sighed audibly. "Look, kid," Greg said, crossing his arms. "These cars aren't exactly cheap. Are you sure you're ready to make such a big purchase? Maybe you should bring your parents or someone who can actually decide." The words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. Bring his parents? He barely saw his dad and his mom worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. They didn't have money lying around for things like this. All he had was his own savings, a modest amount, but enough to get him started. Yet Greg's dismissive attitude made him feel smaller than ever. I saved up," Marcus stammered, clutching his backpack tighter. "I just wanted to look around." Greg raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "Well, looking doesn't cost much, does it?" he said with a smirk. "But buying is a whole different story." Humiliated and angry, Marcus muttered a quick excuse and turned away. He couldn't stand being in that dealership any longer. As he hurried toward the exit, he could feel Greg's gaze burning into his back. Once outside, he leaned against the wall and took a deep breath. trying to steady his racing heart. Tears pricked at the corners of his eyes, but he blinked them away furiously. He wouldn't cry, not over something like this. Little did Marcus know, this encounter would set off a chain of events that would change his life forever. What Greg didn't realize, and what Marcus himself was unaware of, was that Marcus's father wasn't just some absent figure in his life. In fact, Richard Thompson, Marcus's dad, was one of the wealthiest and most influential CEOs in the city. Their strained relationship meant Marcus rarely spoke about his father, and Greg had no way of knowing the truth. Later that evening, as Marcus sat alone in his room replaying the humiliating scene in his mind, he couldn't shake the anger and frustration. Why had Greg treated him like he didn't belong? Was it because of how he looked? Or was it because people like Greg assumed teenagers like him couldn't possibly have real goals or ambitions? Unbeknownst to Marcus, his father was having a similar conversation miles away. Richard Thompson was enjoying a round of golf with a close friend, the owner of Prestige Motors, when the topic of the day's customers came up. Laughing casually, the owner recounted the story of a clueless teenager who had wandered into the dealership earlier. Poor kid didn't even know what he was doing, the owner joked. He looked like he'd never seen a car before. Richard froze mid-swing, his golf club hovering awkwardly in the air. Something about the description tugged at his memory. When he asked for more details, the pieces fell into place. That clueless teenager was his son. Guilt washed over Richard like a tidal wave. How could he have let things get so bad between them? How could he have missed something as simple as knowing what his own child dreamed of? Determined to make amends, Richard decided it was time to reconnect with Marcus, not by throwing money at the problem, but by truly understanding his son's struggles and aspirations. Meanwhile, Marcus vowed to prove Greg wrong. No matter how many obstacles stood in his way, he was going to buy that car and show the world that he was capable of achieving his dreams, no matter where he came from. And so, the stage was set for a journey of growth, redemption, and unexpected twists that neither Marcus nor Richard could have anticipated. The next morning, Marcus woke up with a heavy heart. The humiliation from the previous day still lingered, replaying in his mind like a broken record. He couldn't shake off Greg's condescending tone or the dismissive look in his eyes. It wasn't just about being treated poorly. It was the feeling of being judged based on appearances, as if his dreams and efforts didn't matter because he didn't fit into some preconceived idea of what a car buyer should look like. Determined not to let the incident crush his spirit, Marcus decided to try again. This time he wanted to be better prepared. He spent hours researching different dealerships online, reading reviews and comparing prices. One dealership caught his attention: Reliable Rides, a smaller family-owned business known for its friendly staff and affordable options. Unlike Prestige Motors, this place seemed more approachable, less intimidating, and more focused on helping people find practical solutions. Before heading out, Marcus made sure to dress a little nicer than usual. He swapped his hoodie for a button-up shirt and traded his sneakers for a pair of slightly scuffed loafers. It wasn't much, but it gave him a small boost of confidence. As he stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his collar, he reminded himself why he was doing this. "You've got this," he muttered under his breath. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." When Marcus arrived at Reliable Rides, the atmosphere was noticeably different. Instead of gleaming marble floors and flashy sports cars, the showroom had a warm, welcoming vibe. Posters advertising budget-friendly deals hung on the walls, and soft jazz music played faintly in the background. Most importantly, the salespeople greeted customers with genuine smiles instead of sizing them up. A woman in her mid-30s approached him almost immediately. Her name tag read, Lisa, and unlike Greg, she didn't hesitate before extending her hand. "Hi there, I'm Lisa. How can I help you today?" she asked warmly. Marcus hesitated for a moment, unsure whether to trust her friendliness after his experience the day before. But something about Lisa's demeanor put him at ease. She didn't glance at his clothes or make assumptions about his financial situation. Instead, she listened attentively as he explained his budget and preferences. "I've been saving for a while now," Marcus said cautiously. "I don't need anything fancy, just something reliable that won't break down every other week." Lisa nodded thoughtfully. That's totally understandable. Let me show you a few options that might work for you. She led him to a section of the showroom where compact sedans and hatchbacks were displayed. None of these cars were luxurious, but they looked sturdy and well-maintained. For the first time since starting his search, Marcus felt hopeful. As they walked through the lot, Lisa patiently answered all of Marcus's questions. She explained terms like interest rates, down payments, and warranties without making him feel stupid for not knowing them already. When Marcus expressed interest in test driving one of the cars, a silver sedan with low mileage, Lisa didn't hesitate. Of course, let's get you behind the wheel, she said cheerfully. The drive was exhilarating. Even though the car wasn't fast or flashy, it felt solid and dependable. Marcus imagined himself commuting to work, running errands, and maybe even taking road trips with friends. For the first time, his dream of owning a car felt within reach. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to Marcus, his father, Richard Thompson, was grappling with guilt and regret. After hearing about Marcus's visit to Prestige Motors from his golfing buddy, Richard couldn't stop thinking about his son. The image of Marcus standing awkwardly in that dealership, likely feeling judged and dismissed, haunted him. How had he allowed their relationship to become so distant? Why hadn't he taken the time to understand Marcus's goals and struggles? Richard had always prided himself on his success. As the CEO of a major tech company, he had built an empire from scratch, earning respect and admiration from colleagues and competitors alike. But when it came to his family, he often fell short. His demanding career left little room for personal connections, and over the years, he had drifted apart from both Marcus and Marcus's mother, Sarah. Now, faced with the reality of how disconnected he was from his son's life, Richard realized he needed to change. He picked up his phone and dialed Sarah's number. They hadn't spoken much since their divorce several years ago, but she was still the person who knew Marcus best. Sarah, it's Richard, he began hesitantly. I need to talk to you about Marcus. Sarah sounded surprised but agreed to meet him for coffee later that afternoon. Over steaming cups of espresso, Richard poured out his concerns. He told her about the story he'd heard from his friend and confessed how guilty he felt for not being there for Marcus. I want to fix things, he admitted, but I don't even know where to start. Sarah studied him for a moment, her expression softening. Marcus is a good kid, she said finally. He works hard and has big dreams, but he's also stubborn. If you really want to reconnect, you'll have to earn his trust. Don't just throw money at him, that's not what he needs. Richard nodded, absorbing her words. He knew she was right. Money had never been the issue. It was his absence that hurt the most. Resolved to make amends, Richard decided to reach out to Marcus directly. That weekend, Marcus was startled when his phone buzzed with an incoming call from his dad. They rarely spoke, and when they did, their conversations were brief and awkward. Hesitant but curious, Marcus answered. Hey, Dad? Marcus, it's me, Richard replied, his voice unusually gentle. Can we meet up sometime? There's something I'd like to talk to you about. Caught off guard, Marcus agreed to meet him at a nearby park the following afternoon. When Richard arrived, Marcus noticed that his father looked older than he remembered. There were streaks of gray in his hair, and lines etched around his eyes suggested years of stress and responsibility. Despite his polished appearance, tailored suit, leather shoes, Richard seemed nervous, fidgeting with the strap of his watch as they sat down on a bench. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Richard cleared his throat. Marcus, I heard about what happened at the dealership, he began, and I'm so sorry. Marcus blinked in surprise. You heard about that? Richard nodded. Yes, and I feel terrible for not realizing sooner how disconnected we've become. You're my son, and I should have been there for you, not just financially, but emotionally too. Touched by his father's sincerity, Marcus found himself opening up. He told Richard about his savings, his dream of buying a car, and the humiliation he'd felt at Prestige Motors. To his relief, Richard listened without interrupting, nodding sympathetically as Marcus spoke. When Marcus finished, Richard sighed deeply. "I can't undo what happened, but I promise to do better moving forward. I want to support you, not because of what I can give you materially, but because I care about who you are and what you're trying to achieve." Moved by his father's words, Marcus agreed to spend more time together. Over the next few weeks, Richard made a conscious effort to be present in Marcus's life. He joined him for dinners, attended his part-time job's employee appreciation event, and even helped him research cars. Through these shared experiences, Marcus began to see a side of his father he hadn't known existed, one that was kind, supportive, and genuinely interested in his well-being. One evening, as they browsed listings online, Richard turned to Marcus with a thoughtful expression. "You know, I have a friend who owns a dealership. If you'd like, I can introduce you to her. She's great at finding deals for people on a budget." Marcus hesitated, unsure if accepting his father's help would undermine his independence. Seeing his hesitation, Richard quickly added, "It's completely up to you. I just want to make things easier for you, not take away from your hard work." After some consideration, Marcus accepted the offer. Meeting Lisa again, this time, accompanied by his father, felt surreal. She greeted them warmly and showed them several affordable yet reliable options. With Richard's guidance, Marcus negotiated a fair price and finalized the purchase of a used sedan. As they drove home together in the new car, Marcus felt a mix of pride and gratitude. Pride because he had achieved his goal through hard work, and determination and gratitude because his father had finally stepped up to support him. For the first time in years, Marcus felt truly connected to Richard, not as a distant figure of authority, but as a loving parent who believed in him. Little did Marcus know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would bring them closer than ever before. Over the next few weeks, Marcus and Richard's relationship continued to grow stronger. What had started as an awkward reunion blossomed into something meaningful, thanks to their shared efforts to reconnect. Richard made it a point to be present in Marcus's life, not just with words but with actions. He attended Marcus's part-time job shifts at the cafe, surprising him by showing up during his breaks with coffee and sandwiches. They spent weekends exploring car shows where Richard introduced Marcus to industry insiders and mechanics who shared valuable tips about maintaining vehicles. For Marcus, these moments were transformative. Growing up, he had always felt like his father was more of a distant figure than a guiding presence. Now, for the first time, he saw Richard not just as a successful CEO, but as a human being, someone capable of vulnerability, empathy, and genuine care. The change wasn't immediate or perfect, but it was real, and that meant everything to Marcus. One Saturday afternoon, Richard invited Marcus to join him at a charity gala hosted by his company. "It's nothing fancy," Richard assured him, though Marcus could tell from the formal invitation stacked on the dining table that it was anything but ordinary. Still, eager to spend more time with his dad, Marcus agreed. The evening of the event arrived, and Marcus stood in front of the mirror adjusting his tie. The suit Richard had lent him fit perfectly, making him feel oddly confident despite his nerves. As they pulled up to the grand venue, a sprawling ballroom adorned with chandeliers and gold accents, Marcus couldn't help but marvel at the opulence surrounding him. Guests mingled elegantly, sipping champagne and exchanging pleasantries, while soft classical music played in the background. At first, Marcus felt out of place again, much like he had at Prestige Motors. But this time, things were different. Richard stayed close, introducing him to colleagues and friends as "my son," with unmistakable pride. Each introduction filled Marcus with a sense of belonging he hadn't expected. People complimented him on his poise and asked about his interests, treating him with respect rather than judgment. During dinner, Richard rose from his seat to deliver a speech. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to him. Standing tall behind the podium, Richard began by thanking everyone for supporting the company's initiatives over the years. Then his tone softened as he shifted gears. "Tonight I want to dedicate our efforts to someone very special to me. My son Marcus," Richard announced, gesturing toward Marcus seated at a nearby table. Gasps rippled through the crowd as heads turned to look at Marcus, who suddenly felt his face flush red. He reminds me every day of the importance of humility, perseverance, and believing in yourself, even when others doubt you. Richard continued, his voice thick with emotion. Marcus has taught me that success isn't measured by titles or wealth, but by the connections we nurture and the values we uphold. The room erupted in applause, and Marcus sat there stunned. Never in his wildest dreams had he imagined hearing such heartfelt words from his father, let alone in front of hundreds of influential people. Tears welled up in his eyes, but he blinked them away, smiling shyly as Richard returned to his seat. That was incredible, Marcus whispered, his voice trembling. Thank you. Richard placed a hand on his shoulder. You deserve every bit of it, son. We're just getting started. Back at the original dealership, Greg, the salesperson who had humiliated Marcus, remained blissfully unaware of the dramatic turn of events. However, rumors began swirling among the staff about the teenager who had visited weeks earlier. Word spread that Marcus was the son of none other than Richard Thompson, one of the wealthiest CEOs in the city. Some dismissed it as gossip, but others weren't so sure. Greg himself heard the whispers during a staff meeting, when the owner casually mentioned how small actions can have big consequences. Though no names were mentioned, Greg couldn't shake the feeling that the comment was directed at him. His guilt gnawed at him relentlessly. Had he really misjudged Marcus? Was the kid actually connected to someone powerful? Determined to make amends, Greg decided to track down Marcus. After some digging, he discovered Reliable Rides, the dealership where Marcus had purchased his car. Armed with a bouquet of flowers and a handwritten note, Greg showed up unannounced one afternoon. Lisa greeted him skeptically. "Can I help you?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "I'm looking for Marcus," Greg replied nervously. "I work at Prestige Motors and I owe him an apology." Lisa hesitated before calling Marcus over. When Marcus saw Greg standing there, his expression hardened immediately. Memories of the humiliating encounter flooded back, and he instinctively stepped back, putting distance between them. "What do you want?" Marcus asked coldly. Greg swallowed hard, clutching the flowers tightly. "I wanted to say I'm sorry for the way I treated you. I judged you unfairly and I regret it. Can you forgive me?" Marcus stared at him for a long moment, weighing his options. Part of him wanted to lash out, to let Greg feel even a fraction of the shame he'd experienced that day. But another part, the part shaped by his father's recent lessons about forgiveness and moving forward, urged him to take the high ground. "Thanks for apologizing," Marcus said finally, his tone neutral, "but what's done is done. Just remember this. Never underestimate anyone based on how they look." Greg nodded solemnly, clearly relieved yet still remorseful. "You're absolutely right. Thank you for saying that." As Greg walked away, Marcus turned to Lisa, who gave him an approving nod. "That took guts," she said. "Good job handling it." Weeks later, Marcus found himself reflecting on how far he'd come since that fateful day at Prestige Motors. Not only had he achieved his dream of buying a car, but he had also mended his relationship with his father. Together, they had built something stronger than either of them had anticipated, a bond rooted in mutual respect and understanding. Richard, too, had undergone significant personal growth. For years, he had defined success solely by professional achievements, often neglecting the emotional needs of those closest to him. Through reconnecting with Marcus, he learned the value of presence, patience, and unconditional support. It wasn't just about providing financial stability. It was about showing up, listening, and being there through thick and thin. Their newfound connection extended beyond family dinners and weekend outings. Richard encouraged Marcus to pursue opportunities within his company, offering him a part-time internship in the marketing department. At first, Marcus hesitated, fearing he wouldn't measure up. But Richard reassured him, emphasizing that the role was about learning and gaining experience, not perfection. Under the guidance of seasoned professionals, Marcus thrived in his new position. He brought fresh perspectives to projects, contributing ideas that impressed even the most seasoned team members. His co-workers admired his determination and humility, traits that mirrored Richard's own leadership style. Meanwhile, Richard launched a scholarship program aimed at helping underprivileged youth access education and career opportunities in technology. Inspired by Marcus's resilience and drive, he dedicated the initiative to empowering young people like his son, those who refused to let circumstances define their futures. On a crisp autumn morning, Marcus parked his sedan outside his apartment building, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment wash over him. The scars from that humiliating day at Prestige Motors still lingered, but they no longer defined him. Instead, they served as reminders of how far he'd come, and how much farther he could go. As he stepped out of the car, his phone buzzed with a text from his dad. "Proud of you, son. Keep shining." Smiling to himself, Marcus replied, "Thanks, Dad. Couldn't have done it without you." In that moment, Marcus realized that success wasn't just about achieving goals. It was about the journey, the people who supported you along the way, and the lessons you learned. And for the first time in his life, he truly believed that the best was yet to come. Months had passed since Marcus purchased his first car, and life was beginning to feel like it was falling into place. The silver sedan he drove every day wasn't just a vehicle. It symbolized independence, resilience, and the hard work that had gone into achieving his dream. Each time he turned the key in the ignition, he felt a surge of pride. It reminded him of how far he'd come from that humiliating day at Prestige Motors. But more importantly, it reminded him of the bond he had rebuilt with his father, Richard. Richard's transformation as a parent was equally remarkable. Gone was the distant figure who prioritized work over family. Instead, there stood a man, determined to be present in his son's life. Their weekends were now filled with shared activities, visiting car shows, working on minor repairs for Marcus's sedan, and even attending community events together. These moments weren't just about spending time. They were opportunities for Richard to teach Marcus valuable lessons about responsibility, perseverance, and integrity. One Saturday morning, Richard surprised Marcus by inviting him to join a charity drive organized by his company. "It's not mandatory," Richard said casually over breakfast, "but I think you'd enjoy it. We're delivering supplies to schools in underserved neighborhoods." Marcus raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Schools? What kind of supplies?" "Books, laptops, art materials, the works," Richard replied with a smile. "We've partnered with local businesses to make sure these kids have access to tools they need to succeed." Curious and excited, Marcus agreed to tag along. On the day of the event, they arrived at a bustling high school where volunteers were unloading boxes of donations from trucks. Students milled around, their faces lighting up as they unpacked brand new textbooks and tablets. Watching them, Marcus couldn't help but feel inspired. He remembered what it was like growing up without much, relying on hand-me-downs and second-hand items. Seeing these students receive resources that could change their lives brought back memories of his own struggles and triumphs. As they worked side by side stacking books and arranging desks, Richard noticed Marcus interacting warmly with the students. His son listened attentively as one teenager talked about her dreams of becoming an engineer, offering words of encouragement and sharing his own experiences. Richard felt a swell of pride watching Marcus connect with others so naturally. "You're good at this," Richard remarked later during a break. "You've got a way of making people feel heard." Marcus shrugged modestly. "I guess I know what it's like to feel overlooked sometimes. If I can help someone else feel seen, why not?" That simple statement stuck with Richard long after the event ended. It reinforced something he had been learning through their journey together. True success wasn't measured by wealth or status, but by the impact you had on others' lives. Inspired by Marcus's empathy, Richard decided to expand his scholarship program further, focusing specifically on supporting aspiring engineers and tech innovators from low-income backgrounds. Meanwhile, Marcus continued thriving in his internship at his father's company. At first, stepping into the corporate world had intimidated him. The polished offices, formal meetings, and fast-paced environment seemed worlds away from the cafe where he had worked part-time. But with Lisa's guidance, she occasionally checked in to see how he was doing, and Richard's unwavering support, Marcus quickly adapted. He started small, assisting the marketing team with research tasks and drafting social media posts. Over time, however, he began contributing creative ideas that caught the attention of senior executives. One project in particular stood out, a campaign aimed at promoting diversity and inclusion within the tech industry. Drawing inspiration from his own experiences, Marcus suggested featuring stories of underrepresented individuals who had overcome obstacles to achieve success. The idea resonated deeply with the team, and soon Marcus found himself leading the initiative. For weeks, he collaborated with writers, designers, and videographers to bring the campaign to life. When it launched, the response was overwhelming. Employees across the company praised the effort, while external audiences applauded its authenticity and relatability. Even Greg, the salesperson from Prestige Motors, saw the campaign online and sent Marcus a message expressing admiration for his work. Seeing his son excel in such a competitive environment filled Richard with immense pride. Yet, he also recognized the importance of letting Marcus carve his own path. "You don't have to stay here forever," Richard told him one evening. "If you want to explore other opportunities, go for it. Just promise me you'll always chase what makes you happy." Marcus smiled, touched by his father's encouragement. "Thanks, Dad. Knowing you believe in me means everything." Amidst all the positive changes, Marcus faced challenges too. Balancing his internship, studies, and personal life proved difficult at times. There were days when exhaustion weighed heavily on him, making it hard to stay motivated. During one particularly rough week, when deadlines piled up and stress threatened to overwhelm him, Marcus confided in Richard. "I feel like I'm failing," Marcus admitted, slumping onto the couch in their living room. "Everyone expects so much from me, and I'm scared I won't live up to it." Richard sat beside him, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Failure is part of growth, Marcus. You're doing better than you realize. Remember, it's okay to ask for help when you need it." Taking his father's advice to heart, Marcus reached out to mentors and colleagues for guidance. Slowly but surely, he regained his footing, emerging stronger and more resilient than before. Through these trials, he learned another invaluable lesson: vulnerability wasn't a weakness, it was a strength. As winter approached, Marcus received an unexpected invitation in the mail. It was an elegant envelope bearing the logo of Prestige Motors, the very dealership where his journey had begun. Inside was a note from the owner, apologizing for Greg's behavior months earlier and extending an invitation to attend a private showcase of upcoming models. At first, Marcus hesitated. Returning to the place that had once humiliated him felt daunting. But Richard encouraged him to go, not out of obligation, but as a testament to how far he had come. "Show them who you are now," Richard urged. "Let them see the confident young man you've become." On the night of the event, Marcus dressed sharply in a navy blue suit, his posture radiating quiet confidence. As he entered the showroom, he immediately drew attention, not because of flashy attire or expensive accessories, but because of the aura of self-assurance he carried. Greg spotted him almost instantly and approached nervously. "Marcus, hey." Greg greeted him, extending a hesitant hand. "I'm glad you came." Marcus shook his hand firmly, meeting Greg's gaze evenly. "Thanks for having me." Throughout the evening, Marcus engaged effortlessly with guests, sharing insights about the automotive industry and discussing trends shaping the future of transportation. Several attendees complimented his knowledge and poise, unaware of the rocky start he had endured in this very space. By the end of the night, even the dealership's owner pulled Marcus aside to express admiration for his growth and maturity. Driving home afterward, Marcus reflected on the evening. He realized that walking back into Prestige Motors hadn't been about revenge or proving a point. It had been about closure. That chapter of his life was officially behind him, replaced by new beginnings and endless possibilities. Back at home, Richard waited up for Marcus, eager to hear how the event had gone. When Marcus walked in, his face glowing with satisfaction, Richard knew it had been a success. They spent hours talking about the evening, laughing over funny moments and marveling at how much Marcus had grown. "You've come such a long way, son," Richard said softly. "I couldn't be prouder of you." Marcus smiled, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. "And I couldn't have done it without you, Dad." In that moment, both father and son understood that their journey wasn't just about fixing past mistakes. It was about building a future rooted in love, trust, and mutual respect. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. Months turned into a year, and Marcus's life continued to evolve in ways he could never have imagined. The silver sedan that had once represented his independence now served as a constant reminder of the journey he had undertaken, a journey filled with challenges, growth, and triumphs. Every time he drove it, he reflected on how far he had come since that humiliating day at Prestige Motors. What had started as a quest for a car had transformed into something much deeper, a newfound sense of self-worth, a strengthened bond with his father, and an understanding of what it meant to overcome adversity. Richard, too, had undergone a profound transformation. His decision to reconnect with Marcus wasn't just about repairing their fractured relationship, it was about rediscovering himself as a person. For years, Richard had equated success with professional achievements, often sacrificing personal connections in pursuit of career milestones. But through Marcus, he learned that true fulfillment came from nurturing relationships, supporting others, and leaving a lasting impact on the world. One crisp spring morning, Richard surprised Marcus with an invitation to join him for breakfast at a quiet cafe downtown. It was a place they often visited together, where conversations flowed easily over steaming cups of coffee. As they settled into their usual corner table, Richard pulled out a small envelope from his jacket pocket and slid it across the table. "What's this?" Marcus asked curiously, picking up the envelope. "Open it," Richard urged, smiling warmly. Inside was a certificate, a scholarship award bearing Marcus's name. Below it was a brief description of the program. Thompson Foundation Scholarship for Emerging Leaders. Marcus looked up at his father, confusion mingling with awe. "Wait, is this mine?" Richard nodded proudly. "Yes, it's yours. You've earned it. Not because you're my son, but because you've shown incredible resilience, determination, and leadership. This scholarship will cover your tuition for college, wherever you choose to go." Tears welled up in Marcus's eyes as he processed the magnitude of the gesture. "Dad, I don't know what to say. Thank you." "You don't need to say anything," Richard replied gently. "Just promise me one thing. Keep chasing your dreams, no matter how big or small they are. And remember, I'll always be here to support you." The weight of Richard's words sank deeply into Marcus's heart. For so long he had doubted whether his father truly cared about him. Now, sitting across from the man who had once seemed distant and unapproachable, Marcus realized just how wrong he had been. Richard wasn't perfect. He still worked long hours and occasionally struggled to balance his responsibilities. But he had made a conscious effort to be present in Marcus's life. That effort had changed everything. As summer approached, Marcus prepared to graduate from high school. The ceremony was held outdoors under a bright blue sky, surrounded by friends, family, and classmates. When his name was called, Marcus walked confidently across the stage to accept his diploma, scanning the crowd for familiar faces. He spotted his mom and little sister cheering wildly from the front row, waving colorful signs that read, "We're so proud of you." Behind them stood Richard, clapping enthusiastically with tears glistening in his eyes. Afterward, during the celebratory dinner at home, Richard raised a toast to Marcus. "To my son, the most determined, compassionate, and inspiring young man I know. Your future is limitless, and I can't wait to see all the amazing things you'll accomplish." Everyone cheered, and Marcus felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This moment, surrounded by loved ones who believed in him, was worth every challenge he had faced along the way. That fall, Marcus enrolled in a prestigious university, pursuing a degree in engineering. Thanks to the Thompson Foundation Scholarship, he was able to focus entirely on his studies without worrying about financial burdens. His professors quickly recognized his talent and dedication, encouraging him to participate in research projects and internships. Within months, Marcus became known as a standout student whose innovative ideas pushed boundaries and sparked meaningful discussions. Despite his busy schedule, Marcus made sure to stay connected with his family. He called his mom regularly, updating her on his classes and sharing stories about campus life. With Richard, their bond grew even stronger. They scheduled weekly video calls, during which Marcus would excitedly explain complex concepts from his coursework while Richard listened intently, asking thoughtful questions. Though their worlds were vastly different, they found common ground in their shared curiosity and passion for problem-solving. One evening, during one of their calls, Richard shared exciting news. "I've decided to step down as CEO next year," he announced. "It's time for someone younger to take the reins, and I want to dedicate more time to mentoring students like you, maybe even teach a class or two." Marcus grinned, thrilled by the idea. "That sounds awesome, Dad. You'd be great at it." Richard chuckled. "We'll see. Either way, I'm looking forward to slowing down a bit and spending more time with the people who matter most." Meanwhile, Greg, the salesperson who had humiliated Marcus at Prestige Motors, continued grappling with guilt over his actions. After hearing about Marcus's achievements through company newsletters and social media posts, Greg realized the extent of his mistake. Determined to make amends, he reached out to Marcus again, this time with a heartfelt letter. "Dear Marcus," the letter began, "I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to apologize once more for the way I treated you last year. Looking back, I see now how wrong I was to judge you based on appearances. Your story has inspired me to reflect on my own behavior and strive to be better, not just as a salesperson, but as a person. If there's ever anything I can do to make things right, please let me know." When Marcus received the letter, he felt conflicted. Part of him still harbored resentment toward Greg for the humiliation he had endured, but another part recognized the sincerity in Greg's apology. Ultimately, Marcus chose to respond with grace. "Hi, Greg," he wrote. "Thank you for reaching out. I appreciate your honesty and willingness to reflect on your actions. While the past can't be changed, I believe everyone deserves a chance to grow and improve, including myself. Let's leave it at that." Greg's response was brief but deeply appreciative. "You're an extraordinary young man, Marcus. Thank you for teaching me such a valuable lesson." Years later, Marcus graduated at the top of his class, earning accolades for his groundbreaking research in renewable energy technologies. At the commencement ceremony, Richard delivered a speech honoring the graduating students. As he spoke, his eyes locked onto Marcus, seated among his peers, wearing a cap and gown that symbolized years of hard work and perseverance. "To the graduates," Richard said, his voice steady yet emotional, "remember that success isn't defined by titles, wealth, or recognition. It's defined by the obstacles you overcome, the lives you touch, and the values you uphold. My son Marcus exemplifies these principles better than anyone I know. He reminds me daily that true greatness lies not in what we achieve individually, but in how we lift others along the way." The audience erupted in applause as Marcus stood up, embracing his father tightly after the ceremony. Tears streamed down both their faces as they held each other, silently acknowledging the journey that had brought them to this moment. Looking back, Marcus realized that his initial dream of buying a car had been just the beginning. That seemingly simple goal had set off a chain reaction, leading to personal growth, reconciliation with his father, and opportunities he never thought possible. Through every challenge, he had learned invaluable lessons about resilience, forgiveness, and the importance of treating others with kindness and respect. And though scars from that humiliating day at Prestige Motors remained, they served as reminders, not of pain, but of strength. Marcus emerged wiser, more confident, and ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. With his father by his side, he knew there was nothing they couldn't overcome together. In the end, Marcus's story wasn't just about a black boy humiliated at a car dealership. It was about redemption, connection, and the power of believing in oneself and in others.